many cases that shocked America, what haunted investigators most was not the crime scene itself, but the fact that the killer was sometimes the person closest to the victim. The husband, the father. Someone who appeared calm and grieving in front of police cameras. But behind those composed statements, phone records, surveillance footage, and the smallest forensic details slowly revealed a completely different truth. In today's episode of Real Criminal Story, we follow 3 real-life criminal cases that once shook communities across the United States. From a missing mother discovered in the woods behind her home, to a murder disguised as a home invasion, and a nationwide manhunt following the mysterious death of a young female athlete. There are no Hollywood-style action scenes, no immediate confessions, only small pieces of evidence, conflicting statements, and a question that leaves many people wondering. Do we truly know the people we live beside every day? If you enjoy true crime stories told through documentary-style storytelling, psychological investigation, and behavioral analysis, subscribe to Real Criminal Story so you never miss future episodes. All information presented in this video is based on publicly available investigative records, and the content is intended for documentary, analytical, and educational purposes. One summer morning in Ohio, an elderly woman repeatedly called her daughter's phone, but no one answered. At first, she assumed her daughter might simply be busy or out with friends. But as time passed, a growing sense of unease settled in. Her daughter's name was Wendy. She lived with her 5-year-old son Peyton and her former boyfriend, Daniel Ty, in a small apartment beside a wooded area behind a quiet residential neighborhood. When police first received the missing persons report, the situation remained unclear. Daniel told investigators that Wendy had left town with another man for a short vacation. He spoke calmly, showing almost no signs of panic or concern. Some investigators found that unusual, but at the time, there was not enough evidence to raise serious suspicion. 3 days later, Wendy's mother decided to search for her daughter herself. She walked into the wooded area behind the apartment complex. Neighbors had complained for days about a strange odor in the area, but most assumed it was simply a dead animal somewhere in the forest. As she moved deeper into the trees, she discovered 2 objects wrapped in blankets and bed sheets. Police quickly sealed off the area. Investigators confirmed the bodies belonged to Wendy and Peyton. What troubled investigators was not only the brutality of the crime, but also the location where the bodies had been found. They were discovered directly behind the home where Wendy had lived. If the killer had been a stranger, why choose a location so close and so risky? As the investigation continued, detectives reconstructed Wendy's final days. They discovered that her last text message had been sent on the morning of July 23rd. In the conversation, Wendy stated that she planned to stay home all day and had no intention of going anywhere except to return a rented movie. That directly contradicted Daniel's statement that she had left town with another man. A neighbor later recalled hearing young Peyton crying loudly inside the apartment that same morning. "Mommy, wake up! Mommy, wake up!" The cries reportedly continued for several minutes. When investigators heard this testimony, they began asking themselves what had happened inside that apartment that morning. Had everything ended within minutes? Or had there been a prolonged argument beforehand that no one else knew about? The deeper detectives looked, the more troubling details emerged. Wendy reportedly had several complicated relationships in her past. She often contacted different men asking for financial support or loans. That detail complicated the investigation dramatically. The suspect list expanded quickly. Investigators reviewed emails, text messages, phone records, and communication histories. One by one, they interviewed every man connected to Wendy in the weeks before her disappearance. But gradually, each suspect was eliminated. All of them had verified alibis. Eventually, the investigation circled back to where it began: Daniel Tye. Forensic experts discovered a crucial detail. A roll of duct tape found inside the apartment matched tape recovered near Wendy's body. In addition, phone data revealed that the final signal from Wendy's device came from directly behind the apartment building. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to come together. Investigators believed a violent confrontation had occurred inside the apartment that morning. Wendy may have died during an argument that escalated beyond control, and Peyton, the 5-year-old boy, may have witnessed everything. That theory weighed heavily even on experienced detectives. The disturbing question began haunting many people following the case. How many warning signs had appeared beforehand without anyone truly noticing? After weeks of gathering evidence, Daniel Tye was brought to trial and sentenced to life in prison. But even after the trial ended, many people still struggled to understand how such a tragedy could happen inside an ordinary, peaceful neighborhood. Yet this would not be the only case to force investigators to question the truth hidden behind seemingly believable statements. Several years later, in another quiet rural area of Ohio, a man called 911 early one morning and reported that he had discovered his wife dead inside their home. When police arrived, the scene looked like a failed burglary. Furniture appeared disturbed. Doors were open. The house was in disarray. The husband, Brian, claimed he had fallen asleep in the living room and heard nothing during the night. But investigators quickly noticed several inconsistencies. There were no signs of forced entry. No valuable items appeared to be missing. And perhaps most puzzling of all, how could someone sleep through so much noise inside the house? The wife, Sherry, was determined to have died from multiple gunshot wounds. Still, investigators refused to jump to conclusions. They began reviewing security camera footage surrounding the home. Initially, they hoped the cameras might reveal an intruder. Instead, the footage changed the direction of the entire investigation. The video showed Sherry moving around normally that afternoon. She spoke with family members on the phone, walked through the house, and eventually entered the bedroom. It was the last time she appeared on camera. Only minutes later, Brian emerged from the room appearing extremely tense. One investigator later admitted that watching the footage felt deeply unsettling. There were no screams, no obvious chaos. Yet something about the atmosphere in the video felt wrong. Then another critical detail emerged. Data from Sherry's smartwatch showed her heart rate stopping at nearly the exact same moment captured on the surveillance footage. The timeline aligned almost perfectly. At that point, investigators began asking a larger question. Was modern technology unintentionally becoming a silent witness in criminal investigations? Cameras, phones, smartwatches, vehicle data. Every device leaves traces behind. According to prosecutors, Brian attempted to stage the scene to resemble a burglary. But once investigators assembled the evidence, the story began to collapse. One especially disturbing detail involved video footage recorded days earlier showing Brian holding a firearm shortly after Sherry returned home. No clear explanation was ever provided for his behavior. That moment convinced investigators the crime may have been premeditated. Brian later pleaded guilty and received a lengthy prison sentence. Yet even in the end, he never fully explained his true motive. That left behind a question even the victim's family could not answer. What causes someone who has lived beside another person for years to suddenly become a stranger? While the public remained haunted by that case, another investigation soon captured national attention. This time, it happened in Austin, Texas. A young professional cyclist named Mariah Wilson was found dead inside the apartment where she had been staying before a race competition. There were no signs of forced entry, no obvious struggle. But a neighbor's surveillance camera captured something unusual. A black Jeep slowly drove through the alley shortly before the crime occurred. At first, police did not know who was driving the vehicle, but investigators soon discovered that Mariah had spent time that evening with a male friend who was already involved in another romantic relationship. Detectives began reconstructing the timeline. Restaurant footage, traffic cameras, movement data. Step by step, they pieced together the movements of everyone involved. One detail immediately stood out. The boyfriend repeatedly focused attention on the motorcycle he used that evening. But investigators were far more interested in the Jeep and the person who owned it, his girlfriend. When questioned about why the vehicle appeared near the crime scene, the woman never completely denied being there, but she also failed to provide a clear explanation. Later, forensic experts determined that the firearm connected to the murder matched the same type of weapon discovered at the couple's residence. The investigation accelerated immediately. But just as authorities prepared to arrest the suspect, she disappeared. The Jeep was sold, social media accounts went silent, and an international manhunt began. Investigators tracked flight records, airport surveillance footage, and financial transactions across multiple countries. Weeks later, the suspect was located in Costa Rica. What made this case so controversial was not only the suspected jealousy behind the crime, but the larger question it raised. In today's world, can anyone truly disappear completely anymore? Or does every action leave behind a digital footprint somewhere? 3 cases, 3 completely different circumstances, yet all of them shared one common element. The truth was never obvious at the beginning. There were no immediate confessions, no perfect evidence from the start, only small details, an inconsistent statement, an unusual reaction, a piece of data that initially seemed meaningless. And sometimes, the smallest details become the very thing that destroys the entire story someone tried to create. Perhaps the most unsettling realization behind these cases is not simply what happened, but the possibility that warning signs may have existed long before the crimes occurred. No one just imagined things would go that far. In your opinion, which detail in these 3 cases became the biggest turning point for investigators? Was it the phone data, the surveillance footage, or the contradictions in the statements made by the people closest to the victims?